Today we're going to go into a little bit more detail about managing grasses regeneratively. Regenerative methods in management involve working with the ecosystem, the dynamics between temperature, rainfall, the specific intrinsic habits of species, plants, animals, etc., and the way they harmonise together into an ecology, and that's very dynamic. So we work with this mindset. We do use tools, inputs as well, in order to address certain weak links within the great big chain of complexity. But the long and short of it is, it's management of forces that exist, and we change essentially from bad management to good management. So, in the past, we've taken an isolationist or a reductionist point of view, and we've addressed certain functions within that dynamic in order to get what we want. We've had the ability to do that through chemicals, mineral fertilizers, pesticides, etc. So to take a step back from that and to work in an organic, regenerative way, we've got to have a different mindset. So just going to talk a little bit this morning about grasses. Now, there's a lot of ways to manage the grasses, in tools to use to manage the grass. Now, you can use herbivores, which are the best way to manage the grass. It's all about timing. It's not about the animal. Animals are neither good nor bad for an ecology. It depends on what we do with the animals. It's us. It's the manager that has the effect on how long we have the animal there, the density, the stocking numbers, etc. The timing, when they return, how long they stay there, things like that. So, it's not simple. But we're not going to talk about that side of it. That is a very big subject, and that's really well covered in holistic management, Alan Savory's work, and Grazing for Profit, RCS, those type of people. What we're going to talk about is specifically the grasses. Now, I've made previous videos about the life cycle of organisms, and so what I'll do is I'll go into just that. I'll start off with that diagram. I'll just bring it up on the screen here. So we've got an age curve here, and as you can see, we have a the S-curve of an organism. In this case, it's a grass, or it can be a plant, or it can be a tree. But what we're looking at here is this curve. Now, we understand that this part here, this part of the curve here in the center with the steepest, is the most efficient part of the organism's, the plant's life cycle. This is where it's photosynthesizing the most efficiently. It's generating biomass quickly. It's turning that sunlight energy into mass at the most efficient stage. Then it goes through a flattening off curve, part of its curve, where it gets to here. And in the case of a lot of grasses and plants, this is either when the plant dies, puts its energy into flowering. If it's an annual, it will die here, and then it will put its energy into flowering and then reproduction as seed. If it's a perennial, it will put its energy into flowering, reproduction and seed, and then sit there. And until there's a disturbance event, it won't go back through to this point here to begin its recovery into its most efficient growth point. That's why grasses need animals, and that's why they need managing, because to not have animals on grasses or to not cut grasses is also a form of management. It's just denying something that it needs. If we prohibit that, it's actually a form of management as well. So we have to be conscious about when we cut it, if we cut it, why we cut it, and how often we cut it. And it has to relate to this. Now, we're looking at an individual plant or individual species here. So let's have a look now at how they relate in a ecosystem with other species. So let's just think about grasses. This quick chat is about grasses, so let's close that. Let's have a little bit of a look around for this one. So here we have, let's get my head out of the way. Here we have that same life cycle that we were just looking at before of one species or a species group. What matters is that their life cycle is the same or close enough so that it can be managed in one group. So if it's a cooch and a kikuyu, or a cooch and a some other low succession grasses like that, and they all have a life cycle similar, well, then we can group them into this for the sake of this talk. But in a diverse pasture, we're going to have a lot of different species. Some species that are more desirable than other species, and some species, yes, of better quality to both us and animals and the ecosystem. And as you go up through species succession, you're going to get higher and higher quality plants that are going to embody more and more life. Now, the low succession plants have a purpose, and their purpose is to create conditions of life and establish and colonize and put life in place. Without them, if conditions were too poor for higher succession plants, if those conditions were too poor, what we would get is nothing. Instead, bare soil. So we really, really need these lower succession plants, but a lot of them are not suitable or not desirable for us. We would like to have the best if we could, and we can through management, but it's also management that will give us the worst as well. It depends on how we manage. So if we cut a grass part way through its life cycle, its growth curve, instead of here where it sort of stagnates or terminates, we're going to damage the plant. Now, it will need to then start from here again, but it will need to use its own reserves of energy to come back up here again, and it's going to damage it. It's going to take from itself in order to recover. But if it goes right through to the top here, that plant has stored enough reserves by then to fully recover. And it works in with the soil life, the way it does that, and it's another subject, but the way it works in exchange for minerals and nutrients with the soil life, it becomes a whole web of life, but that's another story. But the way we manage it, we want to let it fully express and move into this point here where it's given the very best in its life cycle. Now, this is a point that I want to make when we're managing grasses and diverse pastures. This is the point of the video. We have the diversity here. So what we're going to do, if we're observing a paddock and we're observing a group of plants and we see flowering, and we see what on the surface, if we look at it from the earlier point of view, where there's a flowering event, a reproduction in plants, that has indicated that that plant can be cut. Now, it's not that simple. Yes, it can. Those plants can be cut. But what we're going to find, if we have a close look, that there's other plants in there that haven't reached that stage there. So if we have other slower growing, high succession species that may need more time to establish and go through their life cycle before they are ready to be cut or grazed. So if we get to this point here and understand that the low succession grasses are all in flower and all in seed, it's very, very tempting for us to intervene then and cut or graze. But what we're going to do if we intervene here is we're going to stop the life cycle and damage this plant or group of plants, And even worse, we're going to stop the life cycle and damage this plant or group of plants, which are the ones we want. Now this is a nuance on it's multiple species together of different life cycles and different places in succession. Now, if we allow this group of species to flower and have a look in the paddock and start to find that there's other groups of species that are still growing, it would benefit us and the ecology to stop the temptation of cutting this group, letting them sit there and flower, and they will have a stagnating and senescent effect upon these plants, because that's what happens when plants get to this point. This happens too with trees, but we can make another video about that. We want to make sure that if these plants are there, and we might not see them early in the piece, we might really have to start looking very hard for these plants. They will be there. We want to let these plants grow. And if we are patient, we're going to start seeing new types of blades of grass coming up. And discover there's more in that pasture than what we thought. But at this point here, we're going to start to see different species groups come into seed. You know, we might see a Soteria coming into seed, or a those mid-range sort of species, which are okay. But we want to have once we see that, we want to have a close look again at the pasture and make sure that if we cut here, we're not going to damage this group, successional group or species group. Higher succession grasses, the highly demanded, highly desirable grasses that we want, ultimately, may always be in the paddock trying to grow. But if we're always cutting down here, we're actually damaging these plants and we're pushing them out. And we're creating conditions for more and more of this species group, because they're doing a job of recovery. So if we're pushing these groups out through management by cutting this all of the time, or even, lo and behold, even down here, if we're constantly mowing, we have put ourselves in a position where we're actually pushing these out or reducing the numbers of these down to critical numbers. The seed bank will be there though. So if we start to manage this group properly by being aware of these groups, and this group here or this group here start to germinate under these, we want to let them run. We want to let even this group run to let this group through. And this group might be the really, really good species like Rhodes grass and Paspalum, etc. Now we might even see this group here flower here. They might come up and flower here if we've been managing now this is a bit of it's a nuance. It's nothing black and white and linear about this. We might find that these groups here, we know that they're there and they're all the time. They might be present and we might observe them flowering when this group flowers. But what you will find is that they're going to be small plants. They're going to be very, very underweight, so to speak. They're going to be very skinny. They're going to have a very small body of growth on them. And they're going to be flowering at a very small stature. Where if we go and have a look at these groups of plants here, in other examples, they might be up to your chest high before they flower when they're healthy. So what that is a signal that they're under stress and they're going into reproduction very early in order to preserve themselves and put down seed, because they're getting pushed out, they're moving out. So if they're a very small plant and they're going to seed as quickly as possible, they're called what we call bolting in the vegetable market garden game. We call that bolting. So these plants could be there. There's a lot of variables, but they can be triggered to flower here. Now if that's the case, we still want to let them run, because you'll find that there'll be more of them coming up, and we really want to preserve them. So let everything sit there and watch the pasture at this point. When we get to there, watch the pasture at this point. And once you've watch the pasture here and you've allowed these through, when you sit there looking at the pasture, your pasture's going to look a lot different. It might be a matter of weeks, 4 to 6, 3, 4, 6 weeks, depending on your climate and rainfall. And then you allow these through. Now it takes a little bit of patience, and your pasture might yellow off and might look a bit ordinary, but you've got to let these run through. Now I'll give you an example in a second of what happens. So this is the good news, right? If you let those species run through, what's going to happen is the management regimen changes that suits this species here, or the higher succession species, instead of the management regimen suiting this species here. So this species is strong by being cut too often. This species is strong by being cut at the right time. And guess what? This species here, under the right management conditions, will outcompete this species. So you will find good quality grasses will start pushing out the low quality grasses. That's what starts to happen, because when the management structure suits this group of plants, they are the strongest by far. They are very, very, very strong plants. It's just that we're actually supporting them instead of pushing back against them. And I'm going to show you some photos, some examples of where we've let this group run through, this group run through, and so this group finally gets to the top of its growth curve. We've cut it all back, and here's what the recovery looks like. So these tall blades, they are the higher succession species. So these tall blades here, all through that, you can see popping out, leading the way after in the recovery, is this group. And this is Paspalum and Rhodes grass. Now underneath them is couch and a variety of other grasses that they're slower to recover. Because what's happened is this group here has built up reserves, because it has allowed to grow all of the way through its growth curve, and it's got a lot of energy stored in its crown because it's got to here. So in its root crown there's a lot of energy stored in it, so because its conditions now suit this group, and so it's leading the recovery. And if we keep managing this way, this group is going to dominate. There are other variables. We can add bioferts and other things like that and make it give advantage in a lot of different ways. It does get a little bit more complex than this. This is a very simple brush over the top, but it's management based, and it's a bit of an insight to just help with the way we look at the pasture. So it's leading the charge. There's another photograph that I have that we can have a look at. So here it is again. It's me holding a leaf there. It's a big leaf. It's very green. The other grasses, as you can see within it, haven't even started to develop leaves, which is really important, because these leaves are, they're solar panels. They're the photosynthesizing part of the plant. So you already have, they're full of chlorophyll. So you already have a lot of photosynthesis being generated by these leading plants here. This group here are leading the way. So what we're doing is, through our management, we're pushing the pasture into strength into this group of plants, this species group or successional group, a higher succession group of plants, and it's all management based. There is a lot more to it. It's timing, how you time it, etc. Now, this particular example, in this example I'm using, of course, syntropic agroforestry. So I'm using a machine to do the grazing. With cattle, It's a little bit more dynamic and variable. It's often quite the results are often better because it's biological. There's manure, urine, microbes, and everything involved. And that is a subject within itself, and I highly recommend you follow Alan Savory's work of holistic management. It's all in there. But that's a really quick insight into grass management and a little bit of a more insightful look into the S curve of the growth habit of an organism.